Hi Draftaholics, welcome to our guide to standard for Nationals 2018. I'm Richard and I'm here with Tim. How you going, Tim?
I'm doing well.
Tim is going to take us through one of the decks that you might see at Nationals this year, and that is an Esper Control list. How does this deck work, Tim?
Okay, so this deck, it's very important to keep hitting your land drops so that you can use your removal spells effectively to essentially trade up in mana using your, for instance, 1 mana removal spells to kill their 2 or 3 mana creatures.
Like a fatal push
like
over here?
using a fatal push for a 2 mana creature or sometimes more. And then you can trade your counter spells for their powerful spells. Best thing about a deck like this, doesn't have many creatures, doesn't have many targets for their removal spells. So they can be stuck with 4 cards in hand while you have a Teferi ticking up and they don't have an answer because all their cards only destroy artifacts or something like that. With your end game plan, grinding them out, Glimmer of Genius draws you cards, turns your Gearhulk just behind you. You can flashback the Glimmer of Genius. So once you get to that point in the game, even when you do start deploying those creatures, you get to keep drawing cards. So you eventually run them out of any answers. So you slowly beat them down.
So your Gearhulk, you can be using it to get back your removal spells or things that you need, but then eventually you're using them to get even more cards and get even further in front.
Yeah, the Gearhulk being the one game plan of winning the game, the other being the Teferi. Now Teferi over this side, it is very good for drawing cards. When you get the emblem on Teferi, your opponent very quickly runs out of permanents and out of lands.
Yes.
It's very hard to play a removal spell when you have no lands in play. So yeah, the whole thing about this deck is hitting land drops, getting to 2 spells per turn by having 7 lands or so in play. The big thing about this deck that some of the red-black aggro doesn't have is Vraska's Contempt. Because it exiles a creature or a planeswalker, it hits basically everything in the format. And unlike other decks, because it gains 2 life, you do get that little bit of incremental life gain that a more traditional removal spell wouldn't give you.
I see in your counter spells here, you've got your Essence Scatter and Syncopate, but you've also got this Disallow. Are there things in the format that you want to use it for not a spell, for an ability? Disallow something?
Yes, definitely. So the 2 examples that I most often have come up, there's a card Champion of Wits, which 3 cost 2/1, and when it comes into play you get to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. Not exciting, but it has Eternalize. So when it comes back, they draw 4 and discard 2. And that's pretty good, and they have to spend 7 mana to do it, so it'd be very embarrassing for them if you were to counter it with a Disallow. The other one is Godfarer's Gift, because the Gate to the Afterlife, when they activate it, you sacrifice the gate and then you can disallow it. So even if they manage to sneak that gate in under your counter magic, you can still hold up the disallow to prevent the Godfarer's Gift from coming into play.
And that shuts down their entire game plan if you can stop the Godfarer's
Yeah,
Gift.
and even though it wouldn't be a great use of your mana, it always does come up that sometimes you disallow a Scarab God activation at end of turn, or you disallow a Planeswalker ultimate. There's lots of small things that can come up. Like even in the control mirror, you can disallow a Field of Ruin activation just to stop them from getting 1 land.
Flexibility is what we like. All right, so there's lots of choices you can have here in this kind of deck too. So as you can see, it's very spread out.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of choices you can make here. Why would you make these choices for your sideboard?
So one good thing about control is that you can play lots of small numbers of cards, because over the course of a game, which is going to go long, you have the chance to draw a lot of different cards. So essentially, when you're playing against a deck similar to Control itself, you'll want to bring in cards like Duress, because you don't play many creatures. This will let you take almost anything. Negate counters any Planeswalkers, any Glimmer of Geniuses. One thing you have to be careful of when you're playing a Control deck is when your opponent's going to be bringing in creatures from the sideboard. Now, Knight of Malice is really good because it is quite good against, funnily enough, itself. If your opponent's bringing whites, History of Benalia is a card that makes Knight tokens that Knight of Malice is very good against. The big one in the sideboard from M19, the new set, is Chromium the Mutable. Now, it didn't make its way into the main deck because it is still very vulnerable to like Fumigate, it's still very vulnerable to Settle the Wreckage. But after sideboard, when people are going to be sideboarding those cards out against you, they usually won't have any way to kill it unless they happen to get it with a Doomfall or something like that. But yeah, there's one Arguel's Bloodfast, one Jace's Defeat, one Forsake the Worldly, just for matchups where, you might want that effect because you will draw a lot of your deck, you'll be able to find them.
I notice there's this Eldest Reborn here. It's very expensive. Is that against a control matchup as well? Would you bring that in?
So game 1s, you can control your opponent quite easily. But games 2 and 3, it is not always so clean. Your opponent will get something in underneath you. You'll need to tap out for stuff. If you get your opponent to tap out for something like a Nissa Vital Force, might have been mentioned before, if you manage to kill that land and then land an Eldest Reborn, make them sacrifice the Nissa, they have 2 turns before that third ability is either going to return the Nissa or return something like a Teferi. So even though the first bit of the Eldest Reborn isn't great, if you're going to tap out, if you're going to spend that 5 mana, leave your counter spells down, you need something big. And that third ability to get back a 5 mana threat with all your lands untapped is a really good thing that you would want.
It's kind of like a little planeswalker sitting there doing a thing every turn.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when the third ability gets back a planeswalker.
It turns into a
Yeah.
planeswalker, literally. All right. Thanks for going through this deck, Tim. How much do you think you'll see this kind of deck in the actual Nationals competition?
Definitely a few players. There's also a blue-white version, which people like as well, an Approach at Second Sun version. So, yeah, a decent number of people will bring it, as well as the new Grixis ones with Bolas that are still emerging.
All right, excellent. So everyone, if you love the long game, you want to grind people out through card advantage, this might be the choice for you.